Okay, let's talk about the full cast audiobook for Stormfront, the first book in the Dresden Files. But first, I need assurances, guys. By clicking on this video, you are legally obligated to put down your pitchforks, at least until I say my piece. Now, likely just like you, I am a huge fan of James Marsters' version of Harry Dresden. He is by far the definitive voice of the series. I'm not saying that he isn't. I've listened to every single audiobook and I think that he's amazing. So when I heard that they were doing a full cast version of all of the audiobooks in the series, I was a little skeptical, wondering how anybody could replace James Marsters, but that's the thing, no one can replace James Marsters, and luckily no one is trying to. As far as I'm aware, he's not stopping anytime soon, so these full cast audiobooks can easily be looked at as a fun new way to enjoy these stories. However, it begs the question, who the hell is going to voice Harry Dresden? Should it be someone who sounds more like James Marsters, or should it be someone with an entirely new kind of voice to try their hand at Harry? In the end, I think they made the right choice with Matthew Bassett. Now, I tried looking him up to see what other regular audiobooks he's narrated, but it seems like he is specifically employed by Graphic Audio, so he hasn't been in any normal audiobooks that you may have heard of, although he did do all of the Court of Thorns and Roses graphic audiobooks. For that series, I imagine it was very graphic indeed.
Oh, brother, this guy...
I didn't end up listening to the sample or anything. Basically, my policy is that if it says Dresden Files in the title, I'm buying it, no questions asked. So I started the audiobook, and at first, I was a little disappointed, but stick with me. This guy was more on the tenor side of the voice range scale, whatever you want to call it, meaning kind of a higher, younger voice than the deeper mid-tones that we get with James Marsters, but also, at least in these first couple books, Harry is very young. He's younger than I am now. He's like 25. And my voice is still a little high compared to Marsters. So it would make sense that he doesn't yet have the slightly gravelly voice that we've come to know, especially from the later books as Marsters has gotten older and Harry has gotten older. He kind of has like a deeper mid-tone voice. This guy is, this new guy, Matthew Bassett, is kind of a shock to the system when you first hear him, but again, stick with me. But yeah, I was initially disappointed until I remembered how I thought of Harry Dresden when I first read the series. I didn't start with the audiobooks. I read the whole series on paper before I ever started listening to the audiobooks. And I remember when I did start the audiobooks that I was surprised at James Marsters' portrayal of Harry Dresden because I had such a different voice in my head, and the more I listened to the full cast version, the more I realized that this guy actually sounds almost exactly like what I had imagined Harry to sound like for all those years. Especially early on in the series, Harry is described as basically a magical nerd with a little bit of brash energy to him. So he kind of sounded like a nerd in my head. And I think that Matthew does a great job of bringing that to life. He's not like super nerdy, like annoyingly nerdy, but like I said, he's got like a slightly higher range in his voice. I'm not going to say that every single line hits perfectly or anything, but for the most part, I think he did a fantastic job. My only hope is that as the series goes on, he maybe deepens Harry's voice a little bit and gives him a little bit more of that edge, since that's the direction Harry ultimately goes later in the series, just as a character, not to mention, that's the direction that Marsters takes him. That's just who Harry becomes. But for now, I'm perfectly fine with how Matthew portrayed him, and I think that he brought certain scenes to life in a way that Marsters didn't. Not that Marsters' version was bad, this is just different, and new. Now, I will say it took me a while to get used to the shift in narrative voice, aka Harry's voice. It's all encompassing because he does the obviously it's first person, so it's his narration. You're in his head, so you're hearing this voice a lot. It's the main voice that you're hearing. And it took, like I said, took me a while to get used to it. I'd say that if you're interested in this at all, just give it a few chapters to grow on you. If you ultimately don't like it, I totally understand, but it took a little time for me to get used to it and a few more to really love it. Just give it a chance, put your expectations aside, and keep an open mind. I was on Reddit earlier, which I always regret going there. I know it's a bad choice to go to Reddit, but it seemed like the general consensus was that people thought this was pretty good. They enjoyed it. I saw a couple people that were like, I listened to the sample and it wasn't Marsters, so I said no, and like I can't listen to anything but Marsters. And my response to that is just like, how lame do you have to be to have no open mind to think that, oh, nobody can ever replace this like single portrayal of James, like, or of Harry Dresden. It's such a boomer take. I hate using that phrasing, but it really is. It's just like, nope, the first guy that did it was the best. And maybe he is. Maybe Marsters is the best. But does that mean that you can't open your mind to being like, hey, I wonder what this other person sounds like playing this character I love? It's just a different take on the character. They're not changing the story. It's not messing with the canon of the character. The words on the page are still the words on the page. It's not like it's a bad TV adaptation. It's just someone else doing the voice. And I think that we should give him a chance because it was pretty damn good. I'll get off my soapbox now. And, now that we're past talking about the switch from Marsters to Bennett, let's briefly talk about the first couple audiobooks. Because every time I recommend this series to a friend, I usually say, just read the first 3 or 4 books on paper and then jump into the audiobook, because the first 4 books were produced by Buzzy Multimedia and were honestly terrible as far as audio quality goes. You could hear James Marsters breathing into the microphone, everything sounded just a little bit staticky, and overall they show their age pretty poorly. I mean, they were recorded in like the early 2000s, I believe. I guess I could look that up, but I assume it was the early 2000s. In book 5, though, they switched to Penguin Random House, and the quality improves significantly. Like, it is night and day just by switching to this other publishing house. And it kept improving. The quality kept improving until they got to where they're at today, where they are masterworks of audiobooks. These graphic audiobooks solve that problem. That problem of the first few audiobooks being basically dog shit. It makes it really easy to recommend these as audiobooks. And they sound fresh and they have great audio quality, and not to mention, this is the interesting thing, is by the time you get to Death Masks, where the audiobooks got better, you could switch over to James Marsters audiobooks, and then you'd have that like deeper gravelly Harry, and it would be fairly age appropriate because that's about the time where he's getting older. I think he's in his like 30s by the time Death Masks comes around. So that would be appropriate to switch to James Marsters during that time. And, just the other day, I recommended these graphic audiobooks to Chris, one of our other co-hosts. He's listened to Deadbeat, the audiobook for Deadbeat, and he had been putting off listening to the first few because he knew the audio quality wasn't great, and so he was going to read them in paperback form or whatever. But I told him, I'm like, hey, this thing just came out. It would be the perfect way to get in for you. And you could listen to these and then switch over to the audiobooks when you get to Death Masks. I think overall it's a good compromise. Also, these audiobooks are coming out super fast. Stormfront came out in August of this year, 2025, and Full Moon comes out in January 2026, which is good because as soon as I finished Stormfront in this new format, I immediately wanted the next one, so I really won't have to wait that long, and neither will you. Like, it looks like it may only be a couple months between each audiobook. I saw a posting, some article today that said they're trying to get through the entire series in 3 years. So we should be, caught up with these, fairly quickly. Let's talk about sound effects and music. Flat out, it is great. We get some really cool noir tunes as well as countless other bits of background music, and all of it is so immersive, and the music really fits the vibe of each scene. If you've listened to graphic audio before, you probably know what to expect, but if you haven't, I think you'll be really surprised. You get every little sound effect from Harry opening a can of Coke, rain falling down, cop car sirens, and of course, Harry's spells. The other cool effect we get sometimes is Harry speaking in the background while he does the narration. I know that sounds confusing. Let me explain. So, the narrative voice that we get throughout the books is just Harry's first person account, his monologue of what's happening in any given scene. But then there's times where mid monologue in the graphic audiobook, he will say something out loud to the other characters or just to himself. A good example of this is one scene where Harry is doing his monologue thing. He's describing to us, the readers, what his apartment looks like. He's like, I live in this little hole in the ground basement apartment. And while he's telling us about his apartment, you hear him in the background, like the character of him in real time. While the monologue Harry is talking to us, he's doing his monologue, and then in the background you hear Flickambicus, and he's like bringing all his candles to life. And it's just a cool little moment like this where they overlay the voices and sound effects in such a cool way, and it really feels immersive. It feels like you're watching a movie, and the whole graphic audio tagline is a movie in your mind. It really does feel like that. It really feels like it's more of a movie than anything else. Okay, so I mentioned the music earlier, and they do really cool things with that too to build tension or to relax tension, and they transition from one piece of music to another really seamlessly. Graphic audio has been doing these kinds of audiobook experiences for so long that it just works really, really well. There's a particular moment, and if I can get the audio to record, I will play it for you, where the tension is building super high as Harry has just seen a vampire for the very first time, and he's really panicking, and the music is frantic and ramping up, and then he has to purposely enter a cold and logical part of his brain in order to not lose his wits while in this dangerous situation. And during this sentence, while he's doing that, the music cuts hard to dead silent, and then he says like the cold and logic of my brain kind of thing, and then it picks up again a moment later after he calms down. And it's really cool effects like this that just kept me listening to see how they would adapt the rest of the story and tell it in their own unique way.
My heart was hammering too quickly. The scene with Rachel might have aroused me if I hadn't seen what was underneath Bianca's mask. Instead, it only made me sick to my stomach, afraid. The woman had given herself to that thing as quickly and as willingly as any woman to her lover. The saliva, some part of me rationalized, desperate to latch onto something cold and logical and detached. The saliva was probably narcotic, perhaps even addictive. It would explain Rachel's behavior, the need to have more of her drug. But I wondered if Rachel would have been so eager had she known Bianca's true face. And now I understood why the White Council was so hard-nosed with vampires. If they could get that kind of control over a mortal...
So that's kind of what I'm talking about with that is, it just does really cool things with the music and sound effects to make you feel really immersed and make it feel like a movie. Lastly, we'll talk about the rest of the cast. Basically, it is phenomenal. This is where I would say the graphic audio outshines Marster's version simply because it is other actors, like actual actors. James Marsters does a great job making different voices for all the characters, but this really is extremely well casted actors for each character. Karen Murphy sounds perfect, John Marcone sounds perfect, and finally, Toot Toot sounds perfect. I've never really liked the way that Marsters did the voice for Toot Toot. I always thought it was like too high pitched and annoying. I know Toot Toot is small and he's supposed to be like, this high pitched thing, but I've just never liked it. And now we finally have a really good representation of what he might sound like. The only character I think was done dirty is Mac. In this graphic audiobook, Mac sounds more like a goblin, like very like heavy grunting. It's very in your face. I don't know why they did it this way, but the way Marsters always did it and the way I imagine it is always a more like subdued, non-obtrusive grunt like your dad would do, just like, not like, huh. Like, there's just way too much emphasis on Max grunting in this book, and I don't think it was the right choice. But anyways, I just wanted to share my thoughts on this adaptation of the series most of us love. I hadn't even noticed that it had come out until a couple weeks ago, and I'm so happy with the final result. This really feels like what I would hope a true Dresden Files TV show would feel like, and it's the closest thing we've got right now, although there are rumors about some movie or show or project that is in the works. Nothing concrete, but we've gotten a little, here and there, a little word of mouth. But anyway, I had a great time with this, and I really hope that you give it a chance, even though it's not James Marsters, it is still fantastic and well worth the listen. All of our links are down in the description, so feel free to yell at us on Twitter or join us on our Discord, or if you'd like to see us record episodes of the podcast live, then subscribe to our Patreon, and you can chat with us while we record, and when we have authors on, you can ask them questions too. Lastly, we now have a SpeakPipe where you can send in voice messages, kind of like a voicemail, and we'll listen and respond to them live on the podcast for your amusement. With all that, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.